Andy, just remember that people won't be able to unmute themselves. So if you do have a question, the participants just need to raise their hand and then we can unmute them.
Okie doke. Hey everyone, welcome. It's just on 1 minute past 9 according to my various watches. So let's get going. I'm going to take you through the CPD program using some slides, but I'm very happy if you have questions along the way. Either type them in the chat box or raise your hand and then we'll unmute your mic so that you can ask them. So please don't hang on to a confusion until the end. At the time, please feel free to stop me and raise your question and let's deal with it at the time. So let me share my screen and let's get on with this. Okay, and I'm going to leave it like this because then we can navigate. And there's some visuals just for those of you who like visuals. So the focus of today is about continuing professional development. As I'm sure you're aware, one of the requirements of having a designation is that you need to remain current in your field, and you need to be able to show that you are current in your field. So this is both an ASDSA requirement and a SACRA requirement for any professional with a designation from any of the professional bodies. If you are an ordinary member and you don't yet have your designation, you do not need to take part in submitting information to the professional body about your currency. It's only when you become you become somebody with a professional designation that it becomes a requirement. But of course, I mean, even if you are somebody who doesn't yet have a designation, you are probably doing stuff to stay current with what's going down in our field, and having a plan to make sure that you get to what you want to get to it's sensible. So let's talk a little bit about then what is the requirement for somebody who has a professional designation and needs to demonstrate that they are current. So firstly, two questions then that I think it's useful to focus on. I'm going to kill my video if you don't mind, so that we can focus on the visuals. So first the question is, how do I get CPD points? And we'll focus on that. And the second one is, how do I then submit some sort of a report to the ASDSA so they can confirm that I've got the points and that this is sufficient demonstration of my currency. So I'd like to start by just thinking a little bit about why CPD is so important. And I think in our field, it is actually extraordinarily important right now because our field is in the process of undergoing dramatic change. There's lots of change happening in our field, and it is actually quite difficult to stay on top of all the change that's happening. So, for example, we know there are ongoing changes to skills development legislation and regulations. Right now, you've probably seen that there are proposed changes to the grant regulations for the CETAs, which we need to become aware of. And the ASDSA is going to respond to these proposals. Sylvia and I are currently working on getting information from our members to formulate a position paper, and we intend that early next week we'll post a draft position paper for all our members to comment on, for you guys to comment on. So there's a lot of change in legislation that we struggle to stay on top of, and we have to stay on top of. The second one is in terms of how technology-enabled learning is having an impact. Now, I don't know how many of you have been following the conversation around how artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, case in point, is changing how people access information and learning. And if you don't know what ChatGPT is, essentially, it is an artificial intelligence that you can access. Anybody can access at this time. They've got a pilot out. You can go to their website and you can ask it to write you an essay on the changes, for example, to regulations it's mostly American based at the moment, so I won't pick South African regulations, to American regulations regarding the vote over the last 100 years, and write it in the style of Barbara Cartland. Just to pick something very odd. Now, if you don't know who Barbara Cartland is, she wrote romance novels. And this AI will draft you an essay in the style that she might have used. Now, you think about that for a moment in the context of learners who are asked to complete essay questions. And they can go to the chat GPT and they can say, please write me a response to this essay question. And it will generate it for them. And they will present it to the assessor. And how is the assessor going to know who actually did the work? So there's stuff going on that is going to change our understanding of of how learning takes place, what we need to go about, how we need to go about assessing learning. There's a whole lot of stuff going on there that we need to stay on top of. And then internally, we also know, and there's all this fuss now about the move over to the occupational qualifications. There's significant changes there about what's available, how we can deliver it, how the external integrated summative assessments must operate, and lots of confusion. And, you know, we're coming up to mandatory grant reporting time, and I'm sure that many people are trying to work out, what do I put into the mandatory grant? Particularly the workplace skills plan as to what we're going to do. You know, which qualifications are going away, which are coming in, are there even providers for these new qualifications? If we've been doing something for a long time and it's going to go away, particular qualification, is there a qualification, or which qualification should I be putting in its place? And will it be funded? How will I get funding? So lots and lots of change happening there as well. And then the last point, which I'm personally quite interested in and wondering how it's going to impact, is that I think that there's a growing expectation from learners and management that we don't just look at a local level for qualifications. And if you're thinking about what skills are needed by the workplace, or what sort of career trajectory an individual should adopt, it's not necessarily going to be restricted to South African qualifications. So, for example, I know one of the major banks uses a UK-based set of banking qualifications in the bank, not as the African set of qualifications. So that's our terrain. And as I've said, there's a huge amount of change going on, and it's really up to us to have enough of an understanding that we know what the key changes are and can keep track of them. So then CPD really is about confirming that you're on top of your game. And the primary person that needs to know that you're on top of your game is you. Okay? That's your starting point, because you need to know kind of so at least if there is something on the go, you need to say, okay, that change is going to impact on what I'm trying to do. I better go and find out about that change. That's a starting point. And of course, it also then is about confirming that you're on top of your game to your colleagues and your clients, internal or external. That's what CPD is about, is can I confirm to people that I know what I'm doing? And how can I do that? Whose responsibility is it then for your own continued professional development? The starting point is it's really up to you to ensure that you remain current, and that you can show that you're current, however you do that. So you need to identify what to focus on that will help you remain current. What the role of the professional body is, it's an objective external body that can confirm it. But in essence, it really lies about you. Because if you're going to go and talk to a line manager or to a client, they, in the first instance, they need to have confidence that you know what you're talking about. And it can then be backed up by the professional body, but it starts with you. So what is the requirement then from the ASDSA? So we are saying to you if we're going to confirm that you're current, you need to attain a minimum of 30 CPD points annually. And so we do an annual exercise where you will give us evidence to show that you have remained current. And if you achieve 30 CPD points, we will say, yes, we're comfortable that you're current. Now, how do we determine these CPD points? In 2016 or 2017, a number of professional bodies got together in Parktown, Johannesburg, as it happens. That's why it's called the Parktown Agreement, to agree on a broad strategy going forward as to how the professional bodies would manage and handle CPD. And they adopted a number of assumptions. So the first one is a definition. It's the ongoing improvement of specific designation-linked competencies. So your starting point is to look at the designation you have and say, okay, if I'm going to remain current, it needs to be around what sits in the designation description. Those are the areas that I'm going to seek to remain current. Second one is that CPD should be something that could occur in a wide variety of contexts. So it could be in the workplace. And you think about how you remain current. Often it's by talking to people in the workplace that you learn new stuff. It might be during coaching and mentoring. It might be outside the workplace. People that you chat to, friends. It might be through specific formal events like courses, workshops, and seminars. And a lot of it is going to be through self-directed learning. So when you're thinking about what you want to do to make sure that you remain in touch with what's going on in our sector, think widely, because there are many areas that places that you will find opportunities to find out what's going down. What is the stuff that you need to know about to remain current? Number 3 is it's about remaining cognate with a designee's profession. So if I can interpret the wording, what that essentially is saying is that it needs to be linked to your skills development area. So there's no point in focusing on areas of learning that are relevant for hairdressing if your professional area is skills development. Seems obvious, but I mean, it's clearly a necessary foundation. Then 2, the designation, designated professional takes responsibility for CPD reports as required by the body they belong to. So we will give you a structure. It's your job to make sure that you keep records, you get information that can be used to confirm your currency, and you keep those records. How do we measure it? CPD points are typically measured in direct hours. And this is quite an important point. So let's just think about it for a moment. We're saying that one relevant CPD hour is 1 CPD point. Now, the professional bodies have the license to be more specific about that. For example, I'm also a member of SABPP, and I know that they follow that same logic, but they also say that it is necessary that each professional in their area also acquires CPD points in ethical conduct. I personally like that. I think that's something that we should really consider adopting in the ASDSA as well. But it's 1 hour for 1 point. Now, that's essentially saying to you that over the 12-month reporting period, you need to get in 30 hours of activities that are about your own learning. That's the focus. Have I learned something? So 30 hours divides 30 hours by 7. 7 4s are 28. That's essentially not even 5 days of learning over the course of 12 months. That's what you're targeting. Now, if you think about the activities that are available through the ASDSA, we, for example, run conversations events every fortnight, typically. We run around about 20 half-hour sessions annually. Okay, so, and you get half a point for each of them. So there's 10 hours. There's 10 CPD points already. So if you just go to those, you get 10 CPD points. We run virtual workshops on a regional basis. Typically, there's one a quarter. They're longer. They're probably an hour, maybe hour and a half. So you're probably going to get another 4 to 6 points there. Attending this workshop will get you a CPD point, okay? Because it's going to be at least an hour. So there's a lot of things that you can start thinking about, and you can say, hey, I've got some obvious places to go to where for no additional cost to me, I can get CPD points. And one of the things that we do in ASDSA is that we generate at the end of the workshop an opportunity for you to get confirmation that you were there, okay? Because that's point number 6. Verifiable proof of attendance is the minimum requirement for awarding CPD points. And we've adopted that as well. So the records that you must keep is anything that you can use to confirm that you attended a learning event of whatever the nature is. Now, if you'll think back to what we'd said as to where CPD can occur, it's some of those occasions like formal workshop seminars and so on. It's a lot easier to get confirmation, verifiable proof of attendance. So we acknowledge that the areas where you are focusing on to remain current, not all of them will lend themselves to proof of attendance. That's just a reality of life, I'm afraid. My own experience is that there's a heck of a lot that you can learn from. I must have my own learning plan, and there will be lots of things that I will use to help remain current, but only some of them will be ones that I can use for sending to the ASDSA to get CPD points. And I say that, by the way, having just submitted my own CPD report to the ASDSA, jotting up the things that I've used to remain current. So there are a lot of things that I did that I couldn't report on because I didn't have proof of attendance. So that's important then, and it also says to you, and we'll talk more about it later on, is it's useful to start planning what information you're going to gather at the beginning of your reporting cycle, so that as the events happen, you make sure that you get something to confirm it. You know, often your proof of attendance is going to be an email saying something. If you save that at the time that you get the email, it's much easier than 12 months later trying to find the blinking email that you might have deleted without thinking about it. Okay, so that's the background, and those are the assumptions that the ASDSA uses in guiding what we do. So part of our undertaking then is to try and make it as easy as possible for people with a designation to undertake CPD. That's the reason why we have all of these events. Apart from helping grow the professional expertise in the field, we want to, and that's why we give proof of attendance, people who attend. And we'll try and make them opportunities available as widely as possible to our designees. And we will also accept CPD points awarded by other professional bodies when their activities relevant to our designations. So for example, if you're a member of SAPP, which is another organization, or with Commensa, which focuses on coaching or so on, if there are activities that you undertake there that are relevant to your designation and they give you CPD points, you're welcome to use those and submit them to the ASDSA. Two things are essential when you're doing your plan. One is that it's got to be verifiable. And when audited, you must be able to prove your attendance or your participation. Now, we, as part of our policy, are obliged to audit at least 10% of the CPD reports that we receive. So it's only at that point in time that we will ask you to prove anything. So hang on to the stuff. Don't send us your proof of attendance or participation unless we ask you for it. And the second one is your activities must be relevant for your competency. And I think I've spoken about that. So what happens if I don't meet the CPD requirements? And the ASDSA is obliged to take this quite seriously. It's a SACWA requirement, and it's part of our policy. You must do things that show that you have remained current and provide evidence that you are current if you want to retain your designation. So if you can't do that, you will then lose your designation. And if you want to gain it back, you're going to need to start from scratch. In other words, you're going to need to go through the whole evaluation process again, put together a portfolio of evidence, and pay for it in order to get your. So it's quite important that you give attention to CPD and that you make sure that you gather evidence and that you submit your CPD report in due time. And that all then just emphasizes the value of planning your CPD at the beginning of the reporting period. Don't leave it until the last moment. Now, the planning, we're all in skills different. I will bet you know more about planning than I do. It's essentially saying that you need to, at the beginning of the period, identify what you're going to include, track it along the way, keep records, and then include it in your reporting. What are the sort of things that you could include? And the top ones are the key ones. So anything that is a formal program that is formally assessed, that's an obvious item for CPD. Qualifications, part qualifications, webinars, anything similar to that that includes a formal assessment. Any workshops or seminars that are not formally assessed can also be part of that. I know all of us get to CETA events to understand what the latest requirements in terms of discretionary grants or mandatory grants, or whatever the case may be. All of those, they should be part of your plan to remain current, and they typically are. And if you can find a way to confirm that you were there, it's also then good for reporting to the ASDSA. You might find it difficult to get a confirmation of attendance from the CETA. They don't normally do that, and it's extra work for them, so they may be reluctant to give it to you. But you could also get a testimonial from a credible third party that you were there. So if you attend with a colleague, I'm quite happy to accept an email from the colleague saying you were there, and you could do the same for them. If you do any research into a field related to skills development, if you write articles or publications, any article in a field related to skills development. So for example, the people then who contribute to our position papers, they can get CPD points. Any groundbreaking professional work-based activities, contribution at a national, international level to the ASTSA technical committee or similar. These are all things to encourage you that when you ask for comment, please, on a position paper, please feel free to give comment, because you can use that as evidence for CPD points. Then yes, we'll make a copy of this presentation available. The last two become harder. Self-directed learning not formally assessed. Any self-study program is part of remaining current. Harder to prove though, obviously. But if you can find some way to confirm it, include it in your report. And then professional contribution to individuals or organizations. So membership of your professional body. Definitely, so your ASDSA membership gets your point. If you are mentoring individuals or if you're participating in a formal committee, you can use those for CPD points. Now, be aware that the focus, though, is not on helping other people to learn. Because I know it's an easy thing for us as skills development professionals. We are helping other people with learning. If your report is dominated by helping other people to learn, that's not good evidence of how you've remained current. So I would make sure that if I put any mentoring of individuals in my report, I'm only asking for a small number of points for that. And the bulk of the points would be around my own learning. Okay. And the opportunities that are available to you, I've already mentioned them. Okay, so I'm not going to linger on that. So important considerations are what to include and how can I get verifiable evidence. Those are key issues. I'm going to ask you now, having spoken widely about what sort of opportunities might be out there, to take a few minutes and make your own list of areas where you believe you should be involved and should participate to sure that you remain current, some of which at least can be used to apply for CPD points. So it's now just on 9:26. Can you, at 9:30, I'm going to start again. Use this time to make your own list, please. Got 4 minutes to make a list for yourself of what you're going to focus on. Okay, it's just on 9:30. I hope that has been a helpful time. Is anybody willing to share some of the items that they've got on their list?
Please raise your hand and then we can unmute you.
Michelle, go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you, Andy. Yes, I think one thing I wanted to inquire about is we have had to revise all our HR policies, especially our training policies with the municipal staff regulations that came out in July last year. And we also had to do, for example, tendering for a pool of training service providers, which we've never done. So we had to do a lot of research and see how to do it, etc. Would those two be able to be counted?
You know, they're obvious areas of learning where you've needed to remain current. So it certainly should be part of your plan to remain current. The challenge is going to be, how do you confirm your learning? So, and how many, and it would be around how many points. So the question is going to be, certainly it's worth at least one CPD point, because I'm sure you spent up to an hour on it, but it's probably worth more than that. And so I would think, okay, how, if I'm going to claim 5 points, how can I provide some evidence to show at least 5 hours worth of learning? Because I bet you there's at least 5 hours worth of learning, more than that, probably a day's worth of learning. So I would include it, but try and find ways where you can provide some confirmation of the number of hours that you claim. Good example. Anybody else? You can raise your hand. Maureen, go ahead.
Margie, you can start.
Hi, Andy. Will be running the OD ETD 50334 learnership for employed learners for the halfway group, as well as a business admin level 3 workshop qualification. So there's going to be some training, 2 days a month for both groups. So attendance registers and learners evaluations, will that count as evidence?
So the question is, you need to, the learning of the learners, I wouldn't focus on that, but you would need to do some preparation for that, your own learning, how to run that.
Okay.
That, I would say, as a way of remaining current. Are you able to prove that in some way?
You mean updating with all the changes, for example, with the OD qualification, with all the changes, current changes with the QCTO, and now the new.
We're losing the sound. Just repeat your comment.
I'm saying with all the changes, with QCTO and the amendments to the levy distribution.
That's excellent learning for you. Challenge is going to find ways to confirm your learning, and it might need testimonials.
Okay, and updating my slides and all of that, and the learning material as well.
I wouldn't use the, sending in a new set of slides for, if you get audited, it's an enormous amount of evidence, and it means that the auditor is going to go and compare the old slides with the new slides.
No, it's one slide really.
I would rather try and find some simpler way of confirming the number of hours. But certainly you could use that if all else fails. You could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Maureen?
Maureen, you can go ahead.
You have a hand up? Go ahead. Okay.
Maureen, we can't hear you.
Any other comments, thoughts, questions?
Maureen, you can go ahead. You are unmuted. Maureen, we can't hear you.
Yeah, Maureen, I'm not sure if you wanted to comment or not. You are unmuted, so speak if you want to chat. So
we're unable to hear you, so maybe use the chat box to type in your answer.
Thanks, Angelique, good idea. While you're doing that, just to comment to Sylvia, SAS law, labor law presentations, as these are, there are a number of cases directly related to skills development. That definitely sounds like critical stuff to remain current. Question is, in terms of CPD points, can you find a way to demonstrate that your participation and the number of hours involved there? That, I think, is probably the challenge with that, but clearly part of your own CPD. Silva, you've got a hand up. Please unmute and go ahead.
Hi, Andy, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Andy, I was just thinking as you were speaking, I was focusing on your list where you had the qualifications, and then about the third point was research. And I was, yes, that's the one. So you have learning program, and a bit later you have research. So I was thinking, if one is doing a master's or a PhD, I would think that we would count the hours under research, and the certificate at the end is proof.
Yep, absolutely.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, cool.
That's very clear learning.
Okay,
And
just related to that as well, Andy, you know, the student is advised to keep a journal to reflect upon their learning and their questions. So the journal would also be evidence?
You know, it could be. You would need to just, again, it's useful to make this distinction about what you're doing here. One is you're doing things that help you remain current, and that might be a long list of things. The second thing is, at the same time, you're gathering information for your CPD report.
Yeah.
And you're trying to find, I'm trying to find the low-hanging fruit. Because there's a lot of things to engage in. But let me go and pick the things from my CPD report that are easy to prove.
Yes.
And make sure I gather that stuff.
Okay, cool.
That always is then the dilemma, is the kind of this burden of proving it. If I say I want a CPD 0.4 and I get audited, can I actually show something that a third party will accept as legit?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had a, sorry, I don't want you to dominate. I just had another example last night. I was reading a labor court case, and in the labor court case, they quoted another appeal court case, which was about skills and scarce skills and the scarce skills allowance. I went off to go and find that as well. I'm not necessarily going to include it, but it occurred to me that that is also, you know, it's your personal learning and development, staying current with what's debated. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks, Andy.
And I think, but I'd also like just to talk about that for a moment. So, you know, the important thing for me is, if we want to remain credible to our clients, to our line management, or to ever, we're constantly doing things similar to what you're describing to make sure that we stay on top of our game. And so the starting point for this conversation is, well, what do I need to do to stay on top of my game? There's a long list of things. I'm going to plan it, make sure I get to whatever forums I need to get to, respond then also reactively when things happen. There's a new bit of grant regulation. I'll go and read the thing to make sure that I understand it. Because when I go and talk to line management, I need to be able to talk authoritatively about what the regulation says to guide the decisions that get made. And then at the same time, I'm saying, okay, I can also then use at least some of this to confirm to ASDSA that I'm actually remaining current. So it's kind of those two things that you're trying to do. Your own currency, making sure that you stay on top of it and planning it. And secondly, then gathering information for reporting. Thanks, that's useful, Sylvia. Maureen, I'm managing health and safety, I need to stay up to date with all requirements within legislations applicable to ensure we comply with legislative requirements. Can I add other legislative workshops? I think so. You know, the regulations, as long as you, Maureen, as long as you can draw a line of sight between that and what you need to do in terms of your designation competency, that is the starting point. It needs to be, you remember, it was cognate with the designee's profession. It needs to be part of what you need to do as a skills development professional, and particularly then also linked to your own designation. If you can draw that line of sight, then yes, I agree with you. Tyrone, the submission of the WSP ATR and been signed off as approved CPD points. You know, Tyrone, I think, I'm not sure that submission of the WSP itself is evidence of remaining current. But we also then know that the CETAs typically change what their requirements are every year. So your learning process to understand that. So when they run a workshop on the changes to the LMIS and how you must do it, that for me is relevant. Getting back a signed WSP, I don't know that that's as powerful evidence as somebody confirming that you went to the CETA workshop. And the CETA workshops are great because they typically are long-winded and will give you between 2 and 3 hours worth of learning. So there's 2 or 3 points. So I find that to my own self, for myself, I have to be there. It's part of what I need to do to remain current, and I get significant number of CPD points out of it if I can get a way to confirm that. Any other questions or comments from anyone in the group? Okay. Well, colleagues, we are close to being done. So what are the final points? We've spoken about this.
Andy, just a second. Michelle has something to ask.
Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you very much. Yes, Andy, last year I listened to this talk, and then one of the, I can't remember who it was that spoke, but said they open a file on their computer, and as they attend these, they save these points and the CPD sheets onto that file, and that's helped me a lot because you attend it, do it, and then collect it all in that same file. So when it's you've got 22, 23, and you just open it and all your evidence is almost there. You just have to, obviously, where you've now had liaison with people regarding the workplace skills plan or attending various other things, all it should be there. So it's much easier for me to write up my list of CPD points, because the first time it was very daunting, but that was most useful for me. Thank you very much.
I completely agree with you, and I'm going to show you. Where did I do it? So I do exactly the same thing. I don't know, Angelique, can you see my
No, we see your presentation.
Okay, let me change that. Stop sharing. Share again. So this is where I save my stuff. I've numbered them because it makes it easy. You'll see I had a strat session where we gave CPD points. The virtual sessions are there. Because I have to manage the conversations, I moderate them. I get both the prep session and the session itself. So I claim 1 point. It's 2.5 hours. There was a conference run by Digitrans last year. Some of you may have joined it. We had a meeting with the QCTO just recently that I was a participant, where we were talking about the legislative compliance. Maybe we wrote a position paper last year. And we had a meeting with the QCTO on the 30th of January, where they wanted comment from us on our position paper. And you'll have seen recent announcements in the chat box, in the WhatsApp group, about what's come out of our meeting, plus other meetings people have held with QCTO to try and sort out these regulatory requirements for licensing. And then my membership renewal is there. And here's my CPD report. So that's what I do. As things happen, I track them, I put them in a folder on my computer, and come the end of the year, it's easy, it's all there. Okay, so opportunities. This, I think we've spoken about. Administration. Keep a record. On an annual basis, you submit your report to us, and then you'll get a confirmation of your designation. You need to get 30 points a year. We must monitor all the CPD reports that are submitted, and we will choose at least 10% of them for auditing. And it's only at that point in time that we would ask you for evidence to confirm the CPD points. What you're actually submitting is just that report sheet. Now, what does that look like? If you go to our website, where you'll see one of the tabs says CPD, and you open that onto that page, you will see that there's a guideline document which says basically what we've covered in this workshop. You'll see the CPD report itself, which is a Word document that you then download, complete, and then you upload it here. So you then submit it on our website. So pretty straightforward. This is what the report looks like. It'll ask for your information up on the first page. It'll also ask you to sign, to confirm the declaration, and to put in the total of CPD points that you're claiming, to sign and so on. We're saying to you, please complete the report, sign it, save it as a PDF, and you upload it in the link that I've shown you. And then on the next page is, I think this is also one of mine, but from a previous, yeah, this is a previous year. That's essentially what you're putting in. Oh, I think we've taken out the date, so you can ignore that. Right. So just simple things. You need to list the CPD activities, include the information, the evidence that you have collected, and the CPD points. And you'll see that the way we've asked you to capture this is in exactly the same way as we're asking members who are submitting a portfolio for evaluation to gather and reflect their data. So save each piece of evidence as a separate document. That makes it easy to identify. And also then give it a unique name and a number. That really helps you keep track of what's going down and listing it really easily. So you list it, so give it a unique number and name, and then record that on the page, the CPD report page, and then specify the points that you're claiming. Trying to keep it as simple as possible. When do you need to submit it? The due date for submission is when your report is due. Sorry, when your membership renewal is due. Now, you will see that our system will automatically remind you, I think it's 3 months in advance, if I'm right, Angelique, of your renewal date that you need to start putting your report together. We do that because it's to try and prevent you from, on the last month, suddenly having a panic because you haven't kept track along the way and are trying in 1 month to gather information over the past 12. So it's to kind of give you an early warning that it's coming up. And then, as I said, you submit just a report and you keep the evidence in case we ask you for an audit. And then just to repeat the guidelines, where will you get CPD points? What activities are available to you? How will you get evidence? If you need more CPD, so in your planning, if you see that you don't have enough activities where it's easy to get points, have a think about where else can you go to make sure that you get the points. And by the by, for example, the CETA forums, the CETA workshops, they don't give you easily confirmation that you were there. So at that point in time, it's very useful then to get somebody else to give you a testimonial that you were there and how long it was. So, you know, don't leave it for 5 months later. Trying to get somebody to give you a testimonial 5 months later, it's going to be a lot harder. And will you generate enough? And that is the outline. Angelique, will you post the CPD point link into the chat box for everyone? Are there final questions?
So,
Tracy, I will update the presentation. Thanks for noting it. And there is the link for your CPD points. Any other questions from anybody? Raise your hand or put it into the chat box. Okay, I'm not seeing any raised hands or any questions. So I think we are good. And so I will thank you for joining us. Maureen's question from you. Yeah, SDF course of wage certificate, that's excellent proof of learning. So the SDF course, I think what is useful is to look at the number of credits that's available. That's definitely a good indicator. Now, we know that one credit is supposedly 10 notional hours of learning. So presumably 3 credits will give you 30 hours. But if that's all that you put into your report, something that's worth 3 credits, I would be reluctant to say that's sufficient evidence that you'd remain current. If, of course, it's a qualification with 120 credits. So to be honest, I work on for my own guideline is I would work on the basis of 1 credit I would reflect as 1 notional hour of learning. Okay, I see you're going to check with them. Yes. Also, please just note, we're only requiring people who've got a designation to report on remaining current. If you remember, it's useful to do things that help you remain current, obviously, because that is your own credibility to your clients and also for yourself in comfortable that you know what you're talking about and you can speak with authority on stuff. But it's only from members with a designation that we require you to submit a CPD report. Angelique?
Andy, so on the question with Maureen, your SDF course, if you're not a designated member yet, and your SDF course counts towards your designation to gain your designation, so you can't use it in a year from now to gain your 30 CPD points.
That's actually a helpful guideline. Thanks, Angelique. So if, for example, your designation renewal is 1 March, which mine is, when I report at the end of February next year, it's only for points that I will have acquired between 1 March this year and 28 February next year. That's how that reporting cycle works. Any more comments? Any other questions? Then I think we are done. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Andy.
Bye then.